Good evening and welcome to Mining the Riches of the Parsha. Tonight is Thursday night, July 4th, 2024. Just a bit of housekeeping. First of all, I missed you last week, but I was having a wonderful time at a beautiful wedding. A week from tonight, July 11th, we will not be studying together because a week from tonight is the ADATH Annual General Meeting, and of course I will be there and participating in that meeting. So we're here tonight, thank God. We will not be together a week from tonight on the 11th, but hopefully with God's help, after that, we'll be able to continue Thursday nights in a consistent fashion. In the mornings, again, at this moment, hopefully we're continuing in a consistent fashion on tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. and then Sunday through Friday going forward at 9 a.m. I think we all understand that the Torah contains mitzvos, commandments, and narratives, stories, that teach us broader lessons and values. And obviously, the narratives in the Torah are carefully curated highlights. Much more happened, much more was said, but the word Torah means teaching. And so what is included in the Torah is what we all need to know for all time. Now, I can only assume that many people questioned Moshe or challenged Moshe throughout his 40-year career leading the Jewish people. I can only imagine. But it's only the conflict with Korach in this week's Torah portion that is preserved for us in the drama and the terrifying consequences that are described in this week's Torah portion. And why is that? Why is this the most serious challenge? It would seem on the surface that it's an HR problem. It's a staffing problem. Who gets the job? Aharon gets the job of Kohen Gadol, the high priest, and Korach, his cousin, claims it's not fair, it's not just. I mean, listen, in all of history, how many people feel that they were passed over for a promotion? Lots and lots of people feel like that. But no one in the history of mankind was ever swallowed up by the earth for making this complaint. So why Korach? What nerve did he hit that had to be punished so drastically and so dramatically? The Rambam says, Maimonides, says that Korach's rebellion was actually a denial of the veracity of the Torah Moshe taught. In other words, when Moshe says that Aharon, his brother, is chosen as the Kohen Gadol, Korach, by challenging Moshe and saying, no, I should be Kohen Gadol, implies that Moshe made it up on his own. And therefore, the argument of the Rambam goes, if Korach's claim that Moshe on his own came up with who could be the high priest, then maybe other parts of the Torah, God forbid, are Moshe's own ideas. And that is a terrible, terrible heresy. The Rambam Maimonides expresses this in his Yud Gimel Ikrim, the 13 principles of belief. The Rambam says that any Jewish person who is not in agreement with these 13 principles cannot consider themselves a traditional religious Jew. And number 8 is as follows. We believe, writes the Rambam, that the entire Torah in our possession today, meaning the Chumash, the 5 books of Moses, the entire Torah was given to us by God through Moshe. Moshe was a scribe receiving dictation. He wrote the history, the stories, the commandments as dictated word for word by God. The words all come from God. It is all God's perfect Torah, pure, holy, and true. He who says that these verses and stories were invented by Moshe, which is what Korach is implying by saying that it was Moshe's idea that Aharon should be the Kohen Gadol, and it didn't actually come from God, which of course is the truth, it came from God. But one who says, like Korach, that something came from Moshe is considered by our sages to be more heretical and misleading than any other heretic. And Moshe understood this was Korach's challenge, and Moshe understood what was at stake. And so in setting up the dramatic showdown between Aharon on the one hand versus Korach and his followers on the other, God has Moshe express that this is about much more than who has the job of Kohen Gadol. Vayomer Moshe. Moshe says, Bezos Teiduun, this showdown will demonstrate clearly and dramatically Ki Hashem shalochani lasos eis kol hamasim ha'ela, that God sent me and commanded me in every word I have spoken and taught to you. Ki lo mi libi, there's nothing from me. There is nothing in the Torah, Moshe says, that comes from me, Moshe. It all comes from God. Now, why is that so critical? Does that make this the confrontation that we must be reminded of for all time? Because only if the Torah is from God, every word of the Torah is from God and not man, not from Moshe or any other person, only then, if every word is from God, do the mitzvos, the commandments, transcend time and place and human reasoning, and they apply to every single one of us. And we do not have the authority to disagree or to deny or to disobey. Only then are the commandments in the Torah binding on all humans for all time. And only then does every word of the Torah have infinite meaning, because it comes from God, not from man. The fact is, there would be no traditional Judaism without this principle. No sense of obligation, no commandments, and no relationship with one who commands. That's why Korach was not just a disgruntled employee. His challenge would have undermined the entire Torah, and disproving him had to be decisive, dramatic, and unforgettable, which it certainly was. Okay, so Korach insisted that he should have the right to be the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, and not Aharon, Moshe's brother. The Kohen Gadol serves inside the Mishkan, inside the sanctuary. On Yom Kippur goes into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies. It is the Kohen Gadol that stands directly before God in the holiest place at the holiest time. Korach was a Levi from the tribe of Levi. He was a cousin of Moshe and Aharon. Now, a Levi, Levites, they have jobs serving outside. The Levites would sing, the Levites would carry. They were outside, not in the immediate presence of God, but removed from, distanced from the spot of the greatest holiness. That's the job of the tribe of Levi, of the Levium. And so, Korach was not satisfied to be a Levi, to be outside. He wanted to be in the spotlight. He wanted to be the highest position, inside the Holy of Holies, where no one else could go. And, of course, in our Torah portion, we learn about his downfall, literally as well as figuratively, and it is dramatically, terrifyingly described in our Torah portion. But it appears that his children learned their lesson. Much later in history, David HaMelech, King David, writes Sefer Tehillim, the book of Psalms. So many of the Psalms are part of our prayers and are so beloved of the Jewish people, recited at moments of joy and sadness. So the Psalms were written by, Tehillim were written by David HaMelech, King David, but a number of the passages are quotes from earlier writers, including Psalm number 48. Psalm number 48 starts with the words, Shir Mizmar Livnei Korach. This is a psalm of the sons of Korach. The sons of Korach actually wrote beautiful, pious poetry that centuries later was included in Sefer Tehillim, the book of Psalms. Now listen to the passage that they wrote in this psalm. I want to preface this by saying that the translation of the words that I'm going to use is not the obviously simple translation of the words, but what I'm going to share with you is based on the way that Rabbi Shneur Kotler understands and translates this passage. So in this psalm, written by the sons of Korach, are the following words. Diminu Elokim chazdecha bekerev heichalecha. We imagined, this is the sons of Korach saying, we imagined God, they're speaking to God, we imagined, God, that your kindness can only be perceived inside your sanctuary. Meaning, we thought, our original idea was, the only way to be able to serve God is to be in the holiest place, inside the Holy of Holies. And this is what the thought of Korach was. Korach felt he could only adequately serve God if he was in the holiest place, inside. Now, of course, Korach was mistaken, but his sons originally agreed with Korach's premise. However, the difference is that Korach did not change his mind, and therefore he was punished with being swallowed up by the earth, but his sons realized that that was a mistaken notion. We can only serve God if we are in the holiest spot. K'shimcha Elokim Kain tihilascha al katzvei aretz. We had a revelation that even at the ends of the earth, we can still have the same closeness with God as the Kohen Gadol inside the Kodesh HaKodashim. Even there at the ends of the earth, God's praise can be found. In other words, they realized the mistake that their father made, the mistaken assumption of their father, and they corrected it within themselves. So the takeaway for us from this passage is that you can approach God whoever you are and wherever you are. You could be the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. You could be a simple person in the forest. You could be working. You could be anywhere in the world you can reach God. It doesn't matter what your job is. It doesn't matter what your lot in life is. That has no bearing on your connection to God. You can have as close a connection to God if you think about God while you're digging a ditch, if that's your job and you're doing it well, as if you're standing inside the Holy of Holies. There's no difference in God's eyes. You can be wherever you need to be. Anywhere, everywhere, anytime, any place. And you can achieve the same ultimate closeness with God that the Kohen Gadol can achieve inside the Kodesh HaKodashim, the Holy of Holies. Holiness, sanctity, connection to God is not just to be found in the synagogue. It's not just to be found on Shabbos or during prayer, but anywhere, anytime, any person. And it doesn't matter what your role is. You don't have to be a rabbi. You don't have to be a kohen. You don't have to be a chazan. You don't have to be the person in charge. None of that matters. The ability of every single one of us to connect with God is absolute. That is the lesson, the revelation that the sons of Korach had that differentiated them from the mistake that their father made. Rabbi Meilech Biderman explains it as follows. He writes, if Korach only knew that an ordinary person who fulfills his or her mission in the world is no less important in the eyes of God than Aaron, the high priest, in the Kodesh HaKodashim, in the Holy of Holies, he would not have rebelled. Because the mistake of Korach was thinking that aspiring to closeness, aspiring to holiness means I have to be at the top. I have to be in charge. I have to have the highest position, or else I'm nothing. But the message of the Torah that it is trying to teach us, and that his sons understood, is that each one of us should try to excel in our mission, in our life, where we are. And this gives a new meaning to the phrase in this week's Torah portion. At the end of the Torah, of this narrative, the Torah says, "V'lo yeh k'Korach v'adaso." Don't be like Korach and his followers. Well, the simple meaning of that is, don't make the same mistake that Korach made. Don't rebel against Moshe. Don't be jealous of Aaron. But now we can see these words in a deeper sense. Don't be like Korach. Be yourself. Don't be like anybody else. You do you, in the phrase that's so popular today. You do you. And here's the point. there is no one who can do you like you do you when you strive to excel at being you. And that will lead us to the second lesson we learn. And this is pointed out by Sivan, Rahav, Meir. A little bit later in the Torah says 4 Hebrew words. Sivan, Rahav, Meir says that these are the most optimistic words in the entire Torah. 4 Hebrew words. Ubnei Korach lo mesu. The sons of Korach did not die. Bnei Korach lo mesu. Korach and his followers died. A terrible death of being swallowed up by the earth. But his sons did not meet their fate. Because although initially they thought the same as their father Korach and they joined in his rebellion, they saw the error of their ways before it happened. And they had remorse, and they did not follow their father's footsteps. And they survived. Ubnei Korach lo mesu, and as we just saw, they went on to write passages of beautiful spiritual poetry that are later included in Sefer Tehillim, the book of Psalms. And it's such an important lesson, even if you are the child of Korach. Even if you are initially inspired to follow a terribly wrong path, you can change your mind. The mistake made by your parents does not have to control your life. You can decide to be different. And even if you started out along a faulty path, you can choose to correct your path. You can still make amends. Bnei Korach lo mesu. His sons did not follow his path, but they veered back to the path of righteousness. So our Torah portion, Korach, surprisingly, is one of the sources for requiring 10 to make a minyan. Meaning to gather together to pray not as individuals, but as Knesset Yisrael, the congregation of Israel, the community of Israel. And when there is a minyan, no matter if it's just 10 or if it's hundreds or thousands, then that group transcends time and place and joins together with every other minyan community in the world in all places and at all times, past, present, and future, and forms one unified people connected to God. Now, the derivation of 10 to form a minyan, not 9, not 11, but 10, is surprising. The way we derive this is surprising, as I will show you. It's also somewhat circuitous. It's based on both this week's Torah portion and last week's Torah portion. Last week's Torah portion, remember there were 12 spies, the Meraglim. 2 of them came back and gave a good report, but 10 came back and gave an evil report. That's the number 10. And you remember from last week that their evil report, their negative report, caused chaos and hysteria among the Jewish people. And you remember, of course, God's angry response. In our Torah portion of Korach, a group of that size is called ADATH. which means congregation, like ADATH Yisrael, ADATH Israel, the congregation of Israel. So the idea, I think, is that you see that 10 people who are unified in purpose can affect an entire society. The 10 spies who spoke negatively about Israel were able to convince the entire Jewish people that going to Israel was a disaster, God forbid, and caused that hysteria. So 10 people, 10 have a power and an energy far beyond 10 times 1. Let me give you another example of this. Remember, earlier in the Torah, in Bereshis, God comes to Avram and says, the people of Sodom are wicked, and I'm going to destroy them. And Avraham negotiates with God. Ulai yesh 50 tzadikim b'sol chayir. Perhaps there are 50 righteous people within the city. Would you destroy the city because of the 50 righteous people? And God says, no. If there are 50 righteous, I won't destroy the city. And they negotiate back and forth until finally they get to 10. Again, the number 10. It turns out that there were not 10, and the city was destroyed. But there's something troubling in the logic of this negotiation, because Abraham is counting on God's justice. If there are 10 righteous people in the city of Sodom, the city should be saved. Well, that doesn't really sound just. Justice would seem to assert that the righteous people of Sodom should be saved regardless of how many they are or how few they are, and the wicked should be punished. That seems to be just. What is Avram's argument to save the entire city because of the 10 tzaddikim, the 10 righteous people? So I've shared before the answer given by Rabbi Shamshon Hirsch. And he focuses on the words, B'soch ha'ir, 10 righteous people who are in the midst of the city. In other words, the argument that Avram is making is not just if we find 10 people who are righteous and they're living by themselves and they stay to themselves, but 10 righteous people who are in the midst of the city, who are involved with the inhabitants of the city, who are willing to influence and encourage improvement throughout the city. If there are 10 such people, with a nucleus of 10 such righteous people, there is reason to hope that the entire city could be saved. Again, this idea that once there's a nucleus of 10, they might have a power and an energy that goes beyond simply 10 times 1. All right, so 10 creates a Minyan, Knesset Yisrael, the congregation of Israel that stands beside God, that stands before God. Okay. But it does sound bizarre that our source for a Minyan, which after all is to create holiness in praying to God, to be able to connect with God as a community, not just as individuals, it is bizarre that we're deriving that from wicked people. The 10 spies were wicked. Korach and his followers were wicked. Yes, I understand that we're defining the 10 creates a congregation, but the example is it's an evil congregation. It's a congregation of wicked people, of Rishayim. Shouldn't we have a derivation for a Minyan which is intended to create holiness and come closer to God? Shouldn't there be a derivation that comes from 10 righteous people? So there are a number of answers to this question. I want to share with you the answer that is given by Rabbi Yaakov Luban, a great Torah scholar. We human beings often view things as black or white, yes or no, good or bad. We look at a person, they're a good person or they're a bad person. Something is either kosher or it's treif. That's not how God looks at the world. And that's not how God looks at us. Because God, in God's infinite wisdom, sees the shades of gray, sees that even within a wicked person there are sometimes positive motivations. Even within wrong actions, there could be components that are holy. Korach challenged Moshe's leadership. We saw earlier that Korach posed a serious theological challenge in his rebellion against Moshe. Rashi explains it differently, that there was an element of jealousy. Korach was jealous of Aharon's role and wanted it for his own. Korach says that he felt that he and his followers were holy. And they wanted the job, he wanted the job of Kohen Gadol to be able to live up to his full spiritual potential. And this implies that Korach had within his scheme a desire and a striving for a greater level of holiness. Now, obviously, he was wrong, and he went about it the wrong way, and he was punished. But God is able to see the goodness mixed in with the motivation of wanting to be closer to God, wanting to be the Kohen Gadol and the Kodesh HaKodashim, the Holy of Holies. God, although we look at Korach as simply wicked, God is able to see, yes, there's wickedness and there's punishment, yes, but there's also a striving for holiness mixed in. And the lesson we are to learn is that God sees the goodness even within one who appears to us to be totally evil. Even within these less than totally blameless individuals, God finds room to see their holiness. And therefore, we make the attempt to derive the possibility of holiness for ourselves in creating a minyan using these individuals as their model. The lesson is that most people are very complex. And we do things for a variety of reasons. And there is light and darkness intermingled in just about all of our actions and motivations. And so particularly when we gather to pray, come to shul, form a minyan, in order to come closer to God, that's when it is particularly important that no one look down on another as being unqualified or unworthy of creating a group that will approach God. Because God sees the good, looks for the good within every single one of us. And what that means is that every time we come to the synagogue, every time we join a minyan to pray as a group, we're really doing two separate things. We're doing something that is bein adam lamakom. We are a service to God, prayer. Prayer is a vehicle to reaching, to connecting with God. But also, every time we join a minyan, it's also an act that is bein adam lechavero. It's an act between one person and his or her fellow. It's about how we look at each other, the way that God looks at each of us. A minyan is only proper when everyone in it is looking for and finding the best in every other single person who is there. Because otherwise, it's not a real minyan. It's just a collection of individuals. This is what we should look for in each other when we come to the synagogue. And I promise, if we look for the best in each other, we will find it. There's a common denominator in all of the different narratives in Sefer Bamidbar, the book of Numbers. Remember, going back a couple of weeks, we had the narrative of the Misonanim, the people that complained about the food. Then we had the narrative of Miriam speaking negatively about her brother Moshe. We had the episode of the Meraglim, the spies who spoke negatively about the land of Israel. This week, Korach speaks with jealousy and rebellion. In next week's Torah portion, we will learn about the Meimoriva, Moshe hitting the rock instead of speaking to the rock to bring forth water. The portion after that, Balak, the king, hires Bilam to curse the Jewish people. The common denominator in all of these narratives is negative speech. Words spoken in anger, jealousy, words that are hurtful, destructive, words that are false or empty. And with each of these narratives, we must constantly remind ourselves to be more careful with our words. So finally, I want to share with you two stories that will help us. The first story I heard from Rabbi Meilech Biderman. A man came to his rabbi to discuss a problem he was having. And the problem this man had is that he was too quick to lose his temper at home. He would get angry. He would say things he later regretted. So he came to speak about this problem with his rabbi. When he arrived at the rabbi's home, there was a line of people waiting to speak to the rabbi, each one with their own subject to discuss. The man waited his turn, and finally, the man came into the rabbi's study. The rabbi knew him. The rabbi knew what his problem was. And the rabbi said to him, "Would you please let the next person come in first, and you'll come in after?" Okay? That's what the rabbi wants. The man agrees, and the man goes outside to wait. Now, the man is standing outside the rabbi's house, and there's a window in the rabbi's study, and the window is open. And the man standing outside overhears the conversation that the rabbi has with the second man, the next man who comes in. And he overhears, not necessarily because he's trying to eavesdrop, but it just so happened that the rabbi was speaking a little louder than he really needed to, so the man standing outside couldn't help but hearing what the rabbi was saying to the other man inside his study. And the rabbi says to this other man inside his study, he says, "You know the fellow who just left the office and he's waiting outside? I want you to go outside and try to make him angry." Now, of course, the man who's standing outside hears all this, and it sounds very bizarre. And the man who's inside, the second man, who is hearing this request to the rabbi, he should go outside and try to make the other man angry. It's certainly a very strange request, but the rabbi asks, and so he does it. So he goes outside. He pretends to be preoccupied. Maybe he's like on his phone while he's walking, and he stumbles into this man waiting outside and accidentally, in quotation marks, accidentally pushes him to the ground, and the man falls into a puddle. He's covered with mud. His nice suit jacket is ripped, and the man says, "I'm very sorry. I didn't mean it. Please forgive me." And the man, who had just been knocked down and is now covered with mud and his suit is ripped, he says, "It's okay. Don't worry about it. It was an accident. No problem." Okay. Now it's this man's turn to come in to speak to the rabbi. He comes into the rabbi and he says, "Rabbi, I have a problem. I want your advice, your help. I have a problem with anger. I lose my temper at home, and please help me because I don't want to be like this." So the rabbi says, "You know, I was just looking outside my window, and I saw another man bump into you and caused you to fall into the mud, and you got covered with mud, and you tore your jacket, and I was watching through the window, and you were very gracious. You were very calm. You're very forgiving. I don't think you have any problem." So the man says to the rabbi, "Rabbi, excuse me, but I don't mean to be disrespectful, but you need to be a little bit more careful when you're speaking to someone in your study with the window open, because I was standing outside. I wasn't trying to listen, but I heard you tell that man to try to make me angry. And that's why, when it happened, I was calm, because I knew that you had told the man to do that, so I was calm." So the rabbi says to him, "And what would have happened if a similar event would have taken place at home without you hearing that I asked the person to do it?" The man says, "I would be yelling, I'd be screaming, I would be cursing." So the rabbi says to him, "So why aren't you yelling now? Why aren't you screaming and cursing now?" And the man says, "Because I know that you sent him. I know that you planned it." So the rabbi says to him, "This is how you overcome a short temper. Whatever happens to you at home, God planned it. And God is watching how you respond. And God's watching even more closely than I was watching through the window at what happened." If you can remember that, you can elevate the words in your home, because those words will always be the most consequential. And just remember, whatever is said to you, God planned it, and God is watching how you respond. But there's one more necessary piece, and with this I will close. This is a teaching and a story from Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz, a great, great scholar of the previous generation. So coming back to the narrative of our Torah portion, Korach and a number of followers rebel against Moshe, and the Torah mentions one of Korach's compatriots, one of his fellow rebels, is a man named On ben Peles. On, the son of Peles. That's his name, On. It's interesting that he's mentioned as one of the rebels at the beginning of the passage, but when it comes to the final showdown, On is not mentioned. He's not there. He was saved. Like Korach's sons, he did not actually participate at the end. So the Talmud says that On ben Peles was saved by his wife, because his wife said to him, On, why are you getting involved with Korach? If Korach wins, you're not going to get anything. Korach wants to be the high priest. If he's the high priest, what are you going to be? And if he loses, you're just going to be in trouble. You have nothing to gain from this. Why would you join a group that has no benefit from you? On listened to his wife. In the end, he did not join with Korach, and his life was saved. He survived. Says the Talmud says, Chachmas nashim bansa besa. The wisdom of women is the basis, the foundation of the household. If a man has a wife who is so wise and he listens to her, it can save his life. Very important lesson. Asks Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, what's so smart about this advice? I mean, isn't it obvious? The whole thing is ridiculous. Korach wants Aaron's job, and he gathers together all these other followers. What are the other followers going to get? It's obvious that it makes no sense to join Korach, because Korach is only looking out for himself. What is so special about the wife of On telling On not to get involved? It's obvious that On should not get involved. Why is she seen as such a wise woman? Says Rav Chaim, everybody knows that it makes no sense to get involved in somebody else's machlokas. Someone else has a machlokas, there's a dispute, it's got nothing to do with me, there's no reason for me to get involved. Everybody knows this. But the chachma, the wisdom, is to remember such a simple truth in the midst of a heated moment. It's simple, yes. But when there's emotion, when there's a rush, when things are heated, it requires wisdom and insight to apply that obvious wisdom at the right moment. And he demonstrated with this story. A man came to his rabbi, and he said, Rabbi, my wife and I, we have problems with shalom bayis. We don't have any peace or harmony within the home. We're arguing, we're fighting. It's going on for years. It's very bad. What should we do? And the rabbi said, one must give in. And the man says, yes, I've been telling this to my wife for 10 years, but she just doesn't get it. So the rabbi repeats, louder and slower, one must give in. And the man says, yes, I'll tell you what, I'll bring my wife here. Maybe if she hears it coming from you, then she'll believe it. But he just could not hear the rabbi saying one must give in, that it applied to him. Yes, we all realize that we have to give in, that we have to not get involved with the machlokas. Yes, these are simple truths. The key is to apply it to ourselves when we need it most. My friends, I wish you a beautiful evening and a great Shabbos, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person.